It's quite common these days. I talk to people who tell me that, hey, Dan, I haven't been interviewing in like 10 years. So what's going on these days? What makes people pass interviews these days? And I must tell you from the start that some of these people are also only 1 or 2 days away from their final interview rounds, in which case, basically, they look at this interview prep as some sort of discretionary spending. Whereas if you look on the other side at the hiring company, anyone who's serious about hiring these days will allocate a generous amount of resources, that is their people, to screen candidates, as well as multiple interviewing rounds, right? Up to 10 interview rounds, by the way. So you can imagine if a company can invest 10 people and 10 interview rounds for a single candidate, then this should give you an idea on the type of investment and the importance that the emphasis that they put on this process, right? But the objective of this video will be to give you kind of, first I'll give you the useful but not decisive advice. The second, I'll focus on what sells, what makes employers click, and what are the best candidates. Actually, two things which make candidates, which correlate with interview success these days. So first of all, AI. So AI is a trend. Because generative AI is such a great marketing tool, there are various use cases that you can employ to exemplify concepts such as building a story bank if you want, or giving us some sample interview answers, or even evaluating your answers if you want. So it is a useful trend. I encourage you to try it out if you want, but in my experience, the best candidates rarely use such tools. Other than for entertainment and, again, exemplification purposes, right? So AI was number one. The second, star answers. So answer questions as behavioral questions, right? So star answers, metrics, specific answers, even dramatized at some point. It's, again, useful advice. I encourage you to take it seriously. However, no one will hire you because you can answer questions in the star format. That I can tell you for sure, right? Number three useful advice would be to role play with someone. This helps you to essentially maybe also eliminate a little bit of that interview nerve that you might have, or interview. If you're being particularly stressed about what if, what's going on, how am I going to perform in a live setting, then role play is something you would want to experiment as well. Number four is people tend to over-prepare their elevator pitch these days. Doesn't correlate with interview success in my experience, but it's a comfy thing to do. So probably that's another reason. And maybe another one, a strong CV. The strong CV does not correlate with interview success, not even today. And the reason why I'm saying is here at Interview Prep is because for some reason, many of you decide to redesign your CV just 1 or 2 days before your actual interviews, your final interview round, that is, right? Okay, now on the decisive advice, what sells? What correlates with interview success these days? Two things. First of all, story banks. So I found, at least in my experience, people that I work with, people who I coach, and people who use my training programs, people who can build a story bank are far more significantly likely to pass job interviews with high-performing companies. This being said, a half-baked story bank is worse than not having a story bank, right? So to give a bit of an idea why I say this is because 95% of candidates fail building a story bank that's good enough by their own standards. Right, so let that sink in for a moment. Okay, so how do you know a story bank is ready? Well, basically, it's ready when it's well baked if it empowers you, and if you feel more empowered to interview and to answer interview questions in general because you have a strong story bank, right? So this is how you know you have what you need going into a serious interview, or you can educate people about your knowledge using your story bank, right? So the first one was having a proper story bank. And the second thing which correlates with interview success, which has always been the case, but it's also far more relevant these days when distractions in the era of distractions, if you want, is listening skills. So people who understand why a question gets asked know exactly how to answer that question in a way that answers why. I mean, the behavior that the interviewer is looking to screen you on, not just the question involved, right? And this is a whole science. Listening skills are not easy to build, right? Now, the problem is that what candidates tend to do here is to interrupt their interviewer. So it's the exact opposite. Like you wouldn't even think about listening why they actually ask you an interview question, but you'd rather answer it as quickly as possible to look like you're extremely smart or stuff like that. And this is how many smart people actually bomb these interviews, right? So again, we're in the era of reactiveness, where people tend to hurry all that much. However, in my experience, listening skills are super useful, right? Now, how do you know you have listening skills? To give you maybe two examples here. If someone asks you, tell me about the time you failed, right? Why would they ask you such a question? Well, first, they would ask you because people feel uncomfortable talking about failure, right? So most will try to sugarcoat it or even outright lie about it, right? Another reason could be, I could tell you in 20 seconds, or 95% of candidates, if they prepare for the interview, if I ask them this question, because if you haven't prepared for interview, it won't come across as naturally for you to talk about failure. It never does, but if you prepare in advance, the answer will be significantly better, right? And three, what you learn from it. Because if you don't talk about learnings, then what are you selling yourself on with that specific answer? Or maybe another example, keeping in mind listening skills, right, would be how do you prioritize, right? Or how do you learn, right? 95% of candidates, or vast majority of candidates, will start answering and will give an answer which is broad and hypothetical on how you would go around prioritizing your stuff if you would be in such a situation, right? So if you answer this question this way in a broad format because it was a broad question, then to me, you don't know exactly why I'm asking you this, right? The reason why. So best candidates will use specific examples. Okay, you could start on general note. You could tell me about some interesting frameworks maybe that you maybe use in your prioritization, but give me a specific example. Will give me what I want as an interviewer and will help me to differentiate yourself from other candidates in a beneficial way, of course, right? So story banks and listening skills are what correlates, in my experience, with interview success these days. So hopefully you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.